H.R. 3362, a bill to amend the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act to require transparency in the operation of American health benefit exchanges.
Pursuant to House Resolution 455, the amendment printed in Part B of House Report 113-322 is adopted. The bill as amended is considered read. The bill shall be debatable for 60 minutes, with 40 minutes equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce, and 20 minutes equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Pitts, and the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, each will control 20 minutes. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, each will control 10 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Pitts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 3362, the Exchange Information Disclosure Act. This bill is fundamentally about transparency. Since Healthcare.gov's disastrous launch, the public has received confusing and conflicting information about the site's functionality and the number of individuals actually able to purchase insurance through the website. States trying to enroll individuals in Medicaid and insurance companies trying to sign people up for private insurance have received incomplete and inaccurate applications from the website. H.R. 3362 would require the Secretary of HHS to provide a state-by-state breakdown of the number of unique website visits, the number of individuals who create an account, the number of individuals who select a qualified health plan, and the number of individuals who enrolled in a qualified health plan or Medicaid. The report must also describe the problems Americans are encountering with the website and how HHS is addressing them. The American people have a right to firm data and an accurate picture of the exchanges. I urge my colleagues to support this bill. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. Thank you. I'm afraid the bill before the House today, H.R. 3362, the Exchange Information Disclosure Act, is simply an effort by Republicans to continue to impede the efforts of the administration to implement the Affordable Care Act. Transparency in enrollment information is important for members of this body to receive, but this bill's requirements on the Secretary go way above and beyond what I think is necessary and valuable information. This is just an attempt to pile on so many requirements on the administration that they are taking away from the true job of enrolling people in the law. Look, enrollment numbers and visitors to the site are important pieces of information, and we certainly all know that. But this bill is simply unnecessary. There's already extensive disclosure of data on health insurance enrollments being provided. The administration releases enrollment data monthly, just like they do with Medicare and the Children's Health Insurance Program and other federal programs. The monthly HHS enrollment reports are excellent, detailed reports. In fact, the newest HHS monthly enrollment report, which was issued this Monday, which covers enrollment through December, has even more extensive data than the two earlier monthly reports. Mr. Speaker, in addition to providing data on total enrollments nationally and in the states, the latest report includes data both for the nation and the states on, first, greater breakdown of those who have selected marketplace plans, second, age breakdown, I stress age breakdown, of those who have selected marketplace plans, third, financial assistance status of those who have selected marketplace plans, and lastly, a breakdown of the coverage level or metal level of the plans people have selected. So these numbers show that there's a very strong demand for the quality, affordable coverage options now available to Americans because of the Affordable Care Act. More than 6 million Americans have now either signed up for a private health insurance plan or for Medicaid, including nearly the 2.2 million who signed up for private insurance through the marketplace. Nearly 1.8 million of these consumers signed up for private plans in December, and that's nearly 5 times as many people as signed up in October and November combined. Frankly, Mr. Speaker, I'm encouraged and excited by these numbers. Americans aren't going to the website because they're forced to, like the Republicans claim. They're going to the website because they want and need access to health insurance, and this should be no surprise. 30%, nearly 1 in 3 of people who have enrolled in a marketplace plan are younger than age 35. 24% are between 18 and 34 years old, and there was a more than 8-fold increase in December enrollments in the federal marketplace. In addition, more than 3 million young adults have gained coverage because the Affordable Care Act allows them to stay on their parents' plan until they turn 26. So we're getting more of the younger people as well. Meanwhile, Healthcare.gov and state websites have received more than 53 million visits, and state and federal call centers have received more than 11 million calls. Now, the administration is committed to release this information monthly, the way they have done with every other federal program to date, so I'm sorry to say that I simply do not believe this is a serious effort in any sense of the way by Republicans. This bill is nothing but a weak effort to smear the law. And I urge members to oppose the bill. There are only so many resources out there. Why would we want HHS to have to, provide this excessive information? I'd rather they spent their time trying to enroll people, doing more outreach, encouraging people to sign up so that they actually have health insurance. So again, Mr. Speaker, I urge members to oppose this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to the chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Upton.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise in strong support of H.R. 3362, the Exchange Information Disclosure Act. This bill would require that HHS provide weekly progress reports regarding the President's health care law, an attempt to ensure greater transparency from an administration that has done everything that it can so far to bury the facts when it comes to its signature health care law. Remember, this is the administration that knew millions of Americans would receive cancellation notices, but they only acted to allow people to keep their health care plans that they had and liked after we forced their hand back a few months ago. And perhaps by acting today, we can again force them to do the right thing and share basic information with policymakers and the public about how the law is working or not. In building Healthcare.gov for the October 1 start of open enrollment, the administration chose not to allow Americans to window shop and find accurate and reliable prices of health care plans in the exchange. Over the last 17 weeks since the law was launched, this administration has released enrollment figures on just a handful of occasions. And we're still left asking the most important question, who's paid? Instead, the administration has gone to great lengths to redefine enrollment as the number of folks who have selected a plan through the exchanges. These numbers simply don't tell us the true status of the law, however. More than 3 months after the start of open enrollment, we still don't know how many Americans have actually enrolled in health plans by paying their first month's premium. Just 1 day before the start of open enrollment, Secretary Sebelius defined success as enrolling 7 million Americans by the end of March of 2014. The administration has since distanced itself from enrollment being a measure of success at all. If enrolling individuals in health plans is not the goal, what is? Preventing access to reliable data about the exchanges is not exactly what you'd expect from the self-proclaimed most transparent administration in history. It should not take a vote in Congress to get basic information from the administration, but without voluntary transparency, we don't have any other choice. The bill before us would require HHS to provide accurate, useful figures about enrollment and the operation of the exchanges on a weekly basis. It also is going to require HHS to report to the American people other key metrics, including demographics of enrollees, Medicaid enrollment, regular reporting on ongoing problems with Healthcare.gov, and HHS's efforts to address those issues. The President's health care law will cost the taxpayers an estimated $2 trillion over the next decade. At the very least, the administration should provide the American people regular and ongoing information about its implementation, There is no reason for the administration to keep the public and the Congress in the dark. Whether the news is good or bad, it's time for full disclosure. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I applaud Mr. Terry for his leadership.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes now to a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, a gentleman from North Carolina, G.K. Butterfield.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 3 minutes.
Let me thank you, Mr. Pallone, for yielding time, and especially thank you for your leadership on our committee. It has been nothing less than extraordinary. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to the Exchange Information Disclosure Act. This bill would cost millions of dollars of limited federal resources, but doesn't include any mechanism for paying for it. It is an unnecessary piece of legislation that will have no impact or benefit to the American people. It is just the latest attempt by the Republican majority to incite fear and distrust of the federal health insurance marketplace and discredit President Obama and the Affordable Care Act. Washington Post columnist Greg Sargent wrote that the Exchange Information Disclosure Act is a political attack coming from a party that wants to see the law fail. The House has voted 47 times, Mr. Speaker, on bills that would repeal or undermine the Affordable Care Act, but not one of them has become law. My friend, Mr. Terry's bill that we are considering today marks the 48th attempt and is another nail in the coffin of haphazard Republican efforts to disenfranchise the American people by chipping away at the Affordable Care Act with the ultimate goal of taking away Americans' access to affordable health care. Make no mistake, this bill is not about transparency and open government. Its true purpose is to pile on more and more unnecessary, cumbersome, and unprecedented requirements so that HHS will be forced to focus time and attention away from managing the federal health insurance marketplace and redirect it to completing worthless weekly reports. I am particularly disappointed in the committee process, or more accurately, the lack of committee process with regard to this bill. The Energy and Commerce, the committee that I sit on, the Health Subcommittee. At no point did the chairman of the subcommittee nor the full committee hold a legislative hearing or markup on this bill. I don't recall one. Surely adding mountains of onerous reporting requirements that will cost the government millions in order to comply would have warranted an opportunity for members to weigh in before it was brought to the floor. Apparently, the chairman of the committee felt differently. This bill is now the 48th example of House Republicans pandering to their base by ramming through partisan policies that attack the president. The bill would require HHS to supply Congress weekly reports detailing the number of unique website visitors to Healthcare.gov, the number of chat logins, and the number of enrollees by zip code and their level of coverage and other data sets. What exactly my friends hope to accomplish with this weekly data dump still escapes me. Perhaps House Republicans weren't aware of the extensive disclosure of data on health insurance enrollments that is already being provided on a monthly basis. The administration releases enrollment data monthly, Mr. Speaker, just like they do with Medicare and CHIP and other federal programs. May I have one additional minute?
Speaker, yield the gentleman an additional minute.
Gentleman's recognized for one additional minute.
Thank you. The monthly HHS enrollment reports are excellent, detailed reports. Weekly reports will shed no more light on enrollment in the health exchange than would weekly reports. The monthly reports. The bill also demands that HHS make publicly available a list of Navigator grantees. Were my colleagues unaware that the department released the entire list of Navigator grantees back in October? I have those here for your inspection. I will say it again, this bill is completely unnecessary. It is Republican fear-mongering. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, the Affordable Care Act is the law of the land. I ask my colleagues to embrace it. It's benefiting millions of Americans in my district and in your district as well. I thank you for the time, Mr. Pallone. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to the prime sponsor of the legislation, gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Terry.
The gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Terry, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to clarify one thing, we did have a legislative hearing on this bill with robust debate on it in that committee hearing. Evidently, you didn't get the notice of that hearing. No, I only have 3 minutes. If I have extra time, I will. Today we're asking what should be an easy vote and, frankly, a bipartisan vote. My legislation, the Exchange Information Disclosure Act, does nothing more than ask the administration to provide Congress, governors, and state insurance commissioners and the American people with information. And by the way, the information that is outlined in this bill to be provided or accessible on a weekly basis is simply what most states already require to be done by health insurance companies within their states. This is a request by state insurance commissioners, especially our one from Nebraska, that's very frustrated with the lack of information that they're receiving about who's signing up for what plans in the state of Nebraska. So this should be easy. But what we're talking about here today is basic transparency, so we all have the data to assess what's working and what's not. This bill is a mechanism for accountability so we can get the answers that both Democrats and Republicans and state insurance commissioners and governors need to know in order to understand what's working and what's not. We are asking for information that an entity overseeing a health insurance operation should have at the tip of their fingers at all times. Our metrics are not complex. We're simply asking for how many people have enrolled. How many of these people have paid their first month's premium, which means they are actually insured, that they've been effectuated? Which plan did they pick? What zip codes are they from so we know what people in Nebraska or Iowa or Kansas have signed up? Were they already eligible for Medicare, or are these new enrollees from the expansion? These are critical issues in determining the safety and soundness of the policies of which being issued that, again, state insurance commissioners usually receive. This administration and some on the other side say that this information that we're requesting is extraneous and costly and burdensome, but yet this data is already being obtained. It's already on a real-time basis being calculated. It's just the issue of when and in what form this is released to the public. And cost, here's the the CBO score. Zero. Not millions that we're being told by our friends on the other side of the aisle in the White House. Now, one other thing. One more minute.
Yield the gentleman an additional minute.
So this necessary, usual course of business data, but we do add another part in here, and another frustration from our state insurance commissioners is they don't know who's selling the insurance. They would like to have the names of people that are the navigators out there. Grants go to organizations, but we don't know who's actually sitting down and selling policies or helping them through the exchange. That's, again, basic information that is normal course of business in the insurance world. And so we're just simply asking that they provide the same information that the state law would require of an insurance company who has a salesman that's out signing people up. And so that's the totality of this bill, and you have to ask the question, if they're fighting so hard, what are they trying to hide? I yield back.
The gentleman from Nebraska yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd yield 4 minutes to the ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Waxman.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 4 minutes.
Mr. Speaker and my colleagues, the supporters of this legislation claim that it's simply an effort to get more information about how the Affordable Care Act is being implemented. But it's not really that. It's an effort to slow down implementation of the new law by drowning the Department of Health and Human Services in red tape. They want enrollment information. But this week, they got enrollment information from the administration. That enrollment information showed that 2.2 million Americans have signed up for private coverage. They want demographic information. Well, HHS has given them demographic information. HHS is going to release all the information that they're asking for every month. But the Republicans are saying, oh, that's not good enough. We want it every week. But they wanted more than what otherwise might be available to them because they want to know some things that I can't understand why they'd want to know them. They want to know the zip codes of everybody who's signed up. They want to know what the details of a chat between somebody who's asking a question on the website and what answers they got. I can't understand why that's important. They want to know what transpired in the call centers. In other words, they want to know what somebody said in a call center. And they, is it their business to know what questions are asked in a call center? They want a list of the people who are the adjusters and the brokers. Well, there are thousands of them around the country. So there's no purpose to know that. They're not accredited by the government. If they are by the states, it's up to each state. They could ask each state that information. Let me put this in perspective. If anybody had a bill asking the private sector to come up with reports every single week on information that they could wait a couple more weeks to get, it would be looked at as just straight harassment. Government red tape, bureaucracy that's intruding into the business for no purpose. Well, that's what this bill is all about. They want to intrude in a government agency. I guess if they have a bureaucratic intrusion and harassment of a government agency, it's okay, but if it happened to a private sector in business, it would be inappropriate. If we ask polluters this information, you can get the information. If you ask them to give them the information every week, why do you need it every week? And I ask the Republicans, why do they need this every week if they're going to get it every month? Well, it's obvious. This law is working. And they don't want to come again to the floor and ask for its repeal because people have insurance. Millions of people now have insurance. If they want to repeal the law, they're going to take that insurance away from them. So they want to continue to say, what are they hiding? What are they hiding that they're not giving you on a weekly schedule, that they're giving you on a monthly schedule? Well, absolutely nothing that is significant. The enrollment reports we already have indicate that over 6 million people have signed up for coverage since October 1. The website can handle 80,000 simultaneous users and has been stable, even though there's a surge of enrollment in late December. The law is working. Well, Republicans don't want to hear these facts. They don't want to know about it, but they think they should get everybody at HHS, maybe even have them hire more people to report to them every week so they can still not recognize that there's good news in what is actually happening. This is a goofy bill. It's absolutely unnecessary, and I urge my colleagues to vote against it.
The gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, just to clarify, we hear the word signed up, equal to enrollment. We may know how many people have signed up. We do not know how many have actually enrolled and paid their first month premium. Secondly, we are stewards of the taxpayers. We're not shareholders. And the lack of data is precisely what led the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee to declare this law as a train wreck, that there are no metrics, no data to determine whether this law is working and on track. With that, I reserve.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Sarbanes.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank the Chairman of the Health Subcommittee. I rise to urge a no vote on H.R. 3362, which I think is really just designed to harass the Department of Health and Human Services as it's trying to do its job in bringing affordable health care to people all across this country. If you look at the metrics that are already being assembled by the agency on a monthly basis, they really present a very clear picture of whether there's progress being made or not being made with respect to the website and signing people up for affordable health care. And of course, we know that there is a lot of progress being made. That monthly report includes the total enrollments nationally and by state, so we can get a clear picture of what that trend is, and that's a positive trend. It includes gender breakdown of those who've signed up for the plans, age breakdown, the financial assistance, and what kinds of plans people are choosing. That's all good, useful information, and frankly, it's the kind of information that it makes sense to collect on a monthly basis, not on a weekly basis. I mean, these numbers sort of naturally evolve month to month. That's the picture, the photograph you want to take month to month. Week to week doesn't really get you any added insight into what's happening with the website or with the sign-ups. And then you look at some of the information that they would require on a weekly basis, and you got to ask yourself, what purpose would it serve? A state-by-state breakdown, I'm reading from the bill now, of the number of web chat logins. What are we going to do with that information? That is not useful. That does not add anything to the clear picture that can emerge on a monthly basis of how we're doing with the website. And finally, I have to observe, as Ranking Member Waxman just did a moment ago, that we hear all the time from our friends on the other side about the importance of government efficiency and working well and streamlining, and we hear them talk about that both with respect to government and obviously in terms of what they want to do for private sector businesses out there. These kinds of requirements don't help with that. They're not going to make the agency function more smoothly and more efficiently and get the information out in a sensible way to the American people. So this is really just designed to kind of harass the agency, make them run around in small circles, gathering information and providing stuff that doesn't give us any added perspective or insight into the progress that really is now being made. We can get that picture on a monthly basis. The information that HHS is providing to us and to the public, to the American people, I think is very valuable on that monthly basis, and that's the way we ought to continue to have it presented to us and presented to the American people. So I urge my colleagues to vote against H.R. 3362. Let's let the agency do its job and do it well. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, opponents of the Exchange Information Disclosure Act have argued that requiring weekly reports on the health care law to the American people is too burdensome, too costly for the Department of Health and Human Services. Yet somehow HHS managed to find money in its budget for taxpayer-funded grants spent on such things as bike lane signs, dog neutering campaigns, promoting a sport called pickleball, and lobbying campaigns for soda taxes. Clearly, HHS does not suffer from a lack of resources, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey recognized.
Mr. Speaker, could I just ask how much time remains?
The gentleman from Jersey has 5 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Pennsylvania has 10 minutes remaining.
I'd yield 3 minutes now to my colleague from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews, who spent so much effort in passing and drafting the Affordable Care Act.
The gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews, is recognized for 3 minutes. Without objection.
I thank my friend from New Jersey for his tireless leadership on this very important cause. It's inspirational. Since the Affordable Care Act became law, 9 million Americans have health insurance who did not have it before. 9 million people. Now, not surprisingly, there have been problems in the implementation of the law. Many customer service problems need to be addressed, and we should come together in good faith and make sure they get addressed. This bill takes us in the opposite direction. It says that people who could be working on solving the very real and important problems of customers trying to enroll in health insurance will have to write a report once a week instead of once a month. You go to get your car fixed, and there's a long line of people ahead of you, and you're going to be late to get back to work, and you find out the reason the line takes so long is that the person at the counter explains the history of the carburetor to every person who comes to pick up their car, instead of waiting on the people who are in line. Requiring a report a week instead of a report a month just doesn't make any sense. There's another reason to oppose this bill, though, that's even more important than that. Today, 10,000 Americans will go home and tell their children or their loved ones that they've run out of income because their unemployment benefits have expired. This week, 72,000 Americans will have that happen to them. There is a bill in this House, on this floor, that could be taken up this morning and voted on to provide relief to our neighbors and family members who are in that position. This majority leadership has ignored that legislation. This is a breathtaking misplacement of priorities. We can spend an hour of the House's time on harassing Health and Human Services into filing one report every week instead of one report every month. But we can't take 5 minutes and debate on a bill that would restore a measure of decency and income to 72,000 Americans a week. Many of these Americans are over 50 years old. For every one job that is advertised, there are 3 people looking for that job. The callous indifference of the House majority leadership to these people is just wrong, and so is this bill. We should reject this bill and instead proceed with a vote on aid to America's long-term unemployed. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey yields back. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to the Vice Chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn.
The gentlelady from Tennessee is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for the great work that he has done on this bill. Mr. Terry has also done great work on this bill. You know what is so interesting, and one of the reasons we find it necessary to come and address these issues, Secretary Sebelius told us in December, 5,000 people a day were getting access to health care that they had not had before. The other side of that story, which was not told, 74,000 American families a day were getting cancellation notices. They were looking at one another across the dinner table and saying, guess what? Our insurance has been canceled. It has had a devastating effect. And as we try to do oversight and due diligence and continue to push for that oversight and due diligence and carry it out even this morning at Energy and Commerce Committee, where we've had Mr. Cohen, what we have found is it's very difficult to get information. Even when we're sometimes hearing from employees, they're admitting what they told us was wrong, but then we do not get the straight story. So it is very appropriate that we require HHS to release weekly detailed reports about the exchanges, including their enrollment, their functionality, the efforts to address the technical issues at Healthcare.gov. Absolutely. Absolutely, it is appropriate because this is all being done with the taxpayers' money. The American taxpayer has paid for every bit of this. It's not the federal government's money. It's not President Obama's money. It's not Congress's money. It is the taxpayers' money, and this is a failed rollout and a failed program. Now, this administration was supposed to be the most transparent administration in history. It has not been that. It's well documented that it hasn't been that, and indeed the rollout and the implementation of this law has been even less transparent. The reason, I think, is because there have been so many problems, such as thousands, millions of Americans losing access to their health insurance. None of the information being shared by the administration regarding enrollment means much of anything. We talk about people that enrolled, but we don't know how many people have paid and how many people have completed that process. What are the demographics of the individuals that are enrolling? All of this is information that the individual that is paying for this, the American taxpayer, deserves to know. Who has paid for this insurance? The White House has backed away from using any measure of success as a means to determine success. But as recently as September, Secretary Sebelius herself said that 7 million enrolled by the end of March would define success of the law. Well, is that 7 million that go to the website, put an insurance product in their cart, and then go think about it? You know, Mr. Speaker, when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time working in the retail industry, selling clothes in a little dress shop. Now, every once in a while, we would have somebody, they would come in, they would put something on hold, and they would say, I'm going to be back. Well, we called them the be-backs, because guess what? More often than not, they did not come back and complete that purchase. Yes, they put it on hold. Yes, they put it in an online shopping cart, but then they move away from it because this program is broken. It is too expensive to afford, and the American people do not want it. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would reserve. I only have myself and one more speaker. Okay. The gentleman.
Gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to a very active member of the Health Subcommittee, the gentleman from Louisiana, Dr. Cassidy.
Gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I kind of keep asking myself, why would we not want to provide transparency? If the federal government is going to do a massive bureaucratic regime involving the American people, why should we not at least require them to be accountable for the success or failure of that regime? The Exchange Information Disclosure Act requires accountability and transparency, which has been, frankly, elusive from the administration on these issues. And indeed, before committee and before Americans, there has been a tendency to give information which is misleading. For example, enrollment numbers are calculated by the numbers who sign up for coverage, not those who actually pay for their first month's premium. In reality, unless you pay for that first month's premium, you're not enrolled. Coverage does not become effective until these are paid, and history shows many will sign up who will never actually enroll. Now, the American people are affected by this. They're paying for it. We are their employees, so to speak. They pay our salary. They have a right to know. And the only way to know is to see the results. I keep on smiling in kind of a angry sort of a way, when I think about those folks who came to testify about the website. 2 weeks before it was to open, we were told it was ready and that there were no problems. I specifically asked if the Spanish language website was ready. Oh yes, there's no problem, we can just stand it up. In truth, none of that was true. Now, the only way we learned it was not true is that when the numbers came out, it was clear that folks were not enrolling. So everything we had been told was exposed as a lie, and yet we would not have known had we not seen those enrollment figures. Now, compliance with this should not be difficult. Insurance companies know on a daily basis how many people have clicked on, how many people have signed up, how many checks they've received. Insurance companies know this on a daily basis. Certainly, Mr. Speaker, the federal government can tell the American people these results on a weekly basis. Now, the Exchange Information Disclosure Act is a common sense piece of legislation that all my colleagues who champion transparency and accountability should support. All it does is ensure full disclosure of the most important data points needed to determine what's really going on with the President's healthcare law's implementation. It's vitally important for the public. It's vitally important for us as we attempt to do the American people's will in our oversight of this program. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison.
The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, we're told that the Exchange Information Disclosure Act is just a good faith effort to try to get some transparency. Oh, but wait, what? Isn't this bill coming from the same party that shut the government down to try to kill it? Didn't that just happen? My memory is not faint about it. My memory is very clear that we stood here watching the Republican majority shut down all of government to prevent people from health care access. And now we're supposed to believe, we just want to make the bill a little better with transparency. No, what has happened is that millions of people are signing up. People know that if you snatch a benefit from people that they have and expect to have, that's going to cause issues. And so now the tactics have changed. Instead of an overt or a 50th repeal bill, now we'll just try to undermine it by making a bunch of paper requirements, more distraction, more paperwork, more division, more distraction, more obstruction. Now, I think I prefer the days when we just had repeal bills. Vote no.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
Okay. Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, this GOP bill is designed to harass the department, preventing it from doing its job. It's an unworkable, unnecessary bill that places onerous, unrealistic, and costly reporting requirements on HHS with no benefit to the general public. I heard my colleagues say over and over again, nobody's going to enroll. Now people are enrolling. They're saying, we want to know whether they paid or not. I mean, where does it end? Why don't you spend your time trying to get people to enroll, trying to give people information and do more outreach so people actually are able to get health insurance? That's what we're trying to do with the Affordable Care Act. Make people who don't have insurance get insurance. Make people who do have it more affordable, have a better benefit package. All these things are wonderful. This is what people want. That's why so many people are, in fact, signing up. And I just cannot help but think that this is nothing but another effort to make it more burdensome, to scare people, to make it less likely that people actually enroll. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to mention that the administration opposes the bill. The administration said that they oppose the passage because it would require unfunded, unprecedented, and unnecessary reporting requirements that exceed those of other public and private programs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge a no vote.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 3 minutes to close.
Mr. Speaker, as Secretary Sebelius acknowledged at an Energy and Commerce hearing in December, enrollment in an exchange plan is not complete until the first month's premium has been paid. The administration so far has refused to tell the American people how many people are actually enrolled by paying their first month's premium in the healthcare laws exchanges. Asking the department to provide the American people regular updates is simply a matter of transparency. Given that HHS officials were so blatantly wrong about the readiness of the healthcare laws exchanges, they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. Regular disclosure is necessary to assess the status of the law, and that is all this bill requires. Let's make the administration, who has continually held back facts regarding implementation of the healthcare law, meet their pledge to be the most transparent in history. I urge my colleagues to vote for this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania yields back his remaining time. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 3362, the Exchange Information Disclosure Act. There's widespread agreement that the Obamacare rollout was a failure. Most of us believe the administration's lack of transparency and candor with Congress and the American people caused most of the problems. Since the beginning of the rollout, I've pressed the administration to release enrollment data to Congress. The data including who's actually enrolling and what mix of those who signed up looks like. Those are the kinds of facts we need before us to evaluate how this fundamental restructuring of our healthcare system is really operating. Yet the administration did not provide that long-promised transparency. Instead, I was forced to subpoena the administration to get any information. While I've received some of what I requested, it's not enough for Congress to understand the true impact of this law. It's clear that more than halfway through the enrollment, the administration is failing to meet its own goal of 7 million enrollees by March 31st. Last week, the administration released data that showed it has failed to meet even a more important goal, the right mix of young and healthy enrollees. The reality is that you need a good balance of young and healthy individuals in order to offset the more expensive costs of those who are older and less healthy. Without enough young and healthy enrollees, millions of Americans, including those who've had their plan canceled as a result of the President's broken promise, will see higher costs and fewer choices. With the little data we have, we can see this is actually what's happening. The American people deserve better than the administration's empty promises. They deserve to know what is really going on. Additionally, the administration has not provided any information on the number of people who have completed enrollment. We don't know how many people have paid their premium. And taxpayers don't know how many people are receiving tax credits. There's no harm to national security if the administration provides this information to Congress, the media, and the American people, but there may be harm to an individual's health security if their interests aren't protected. Frankly, I believe this administration cares more about implementing this law than protecting the health care of American families. The American people have every right to know this information and the future of their health care. Having this data will not change the President's broken promises that if you like your plan, you can keep it, or his promise that families will see a $2,500 reduction in their premiums. However, it will undoubtedly affect Americans' health care future. This is not just arbitrary data. This information will determine how much premiums will increase next year, whether access to care will become more limited, and how many insurers may no longer offer coverage, and whether or not you can keep seeing your current doctor. This administration's failed rollout has given the American people little confidence that they can effectively oversee the overhaul of 1/6 of the economy. What possible reason, other than politics, could there be for the administration not releasing this information? This is data that Congress and the American people deserve to know, and that the administration should readily and willingly provide. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this bill today, and I call on the Senate to take quick action to move this common sense legislation forward, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Michigan is
I
recognized.
yield myself such time as I shall consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I think informed people are asking, why are we taking up this bill this morning? I guess one reason is because the Republicans will do anything they can to undermine ACA. Indeed, the more it's successful, the more desperate they become. The administration says it quite clearly. To implement, and I quote, this new reporting system, contracts may need to be modified, and new staff would need to be hired on an expedited basis, adding millions of dollars in cost to states and the federal government, without additional funding from the Congress for information that is already largely being provided on a monthly basis, consistent with other publicly funded health care programs. Maybe a second reason we're taking up this bill is because the Republicans in this House think there's nothing else to do. This bill is going nowhere in the Senate, and you know that. You know that. But there is something else that we should be doing. We're leaving here for 11 days. The House Republicans have said we're not going to be in session next week. 1.5 million Americans have lost their unemployment insurance because of an action from this House of Representatives. Next week 72,000 more will be added to the 1.5 million people. 50,000 in the state from which Mr. Camp and I come from. 50,000. Left out in the cold. Left out in the cold. Left really on their own devices without a single bit of assistance that they really worked for. These are people out of work through no fault of their own, looking for work. And essentially they get from this institution action this morning on a bill going nowhere when there is somewhere we should be going. I think this morning represents, maybe more vividly than in recent times, a reprehensible distortion of priorities of the majority in this House. 50,000 people in Michigan looking for work at a time when there remains a historic high percentage of the unemployed who are long-term unemployed. 3 people looking for work for every job that's available. And we come forth here with a bill that's going nowhere. Reprehensible. Inexcusable. You can go home. I suggest you go home and talk, I guess you haven't done this yet, to the long-term unemployed. Every single person who votes for this bill should go home and talk to those out of work and out of luck, because the majority in this institution, in this House, are simply out of sync with the needs of the American people. We shouldn't vote no on this bill because we need the opportunity to vote yes on what really matters. I reserve the balance of my time.
Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, is recognized.
Well, I thank the chair for that admonition, and I would yield 3 minutes to the distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee, the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Young.
The gentleman from Indiana is recognized
Chairman.
for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, since the launch of open enrollment in Healthcare.gov on October 1st, I've heard repeated stories of frustration from my constituents trying to enroll in the federal exchanges. The President and his administration have tried to assure us time and again that the website's improving and that Americans are enrolling. Unfortunately, neither the stories I've been told nor the claims of this administration are easy to verify, because HHS is giving us very little data to go off of. Now that's a shame, because one of the greatest constitutional obligations of the legislative branch is robust oversight of the executive branch, to be sure the laws are working and being enforced as intended. But there's an even bigger shame here. In August of 2013, HHS estimated that approximately 900,000 individuals in my home state of Indiana were uninsured. This week, HHS offered us a progress report. Now, can you guess how many Hoosiers, according to this report, actually selected a plan through Healthcare.gov as of December 28th? Only 30,000. Now that means, according to the HHS estimates, the Obama administration estimates, 29 out of every 30 uninsured Hoosiers have not selected a plan through Healthcare.gov. That 30,000 figure, by the way, is suspect in itself, to put it charitably. Since HHS is only reporting those who put a plan in a shopping cart, we don't know how many actually went through with the purchase. Now, with a big deadline coming up for the individual mandate tax penalty, it's imperative that Congress understands exactly how many people are in compliance with the law Merely selecting a plan won't help you avoid being taxed by the IRS. That's why I'm a strong supporter of the Exchange Information Disclosure Act. The Obama administration should be required to provide the American people and Congress weekly reports on the status of Healthcare.gov. They should be required to tell us how many are actually purchasing plans. They should be required to tell us all sorts of additional data points they're already tracking that will help Congress perform our oversight role on behalf of the American people. I urge my colleagues to support this measure here in the House and hopefully in the Senate, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Indiana yields back. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, is recognized.
I now yield 3 minutes to a member of our committee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Crowley.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes from New York.
Speaker, I thank the gentleman from Michigan for yielding me this time. Mr. Speaker, it's a shame we're not up here considering an extension of the unemployment insurance. American families are looking for some kind of sign that their Congress isn't going to leave town without extending unemployment insurance. I don't think they're amused by this 48th attempt to undermine health care in our country. The fact is, the legislation before us is supposedly all about the numbers. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle are fixated on the numbers behind the Affordable Care Act. They seem to think they'll find numbers that somehow discredit the law and the important benefits it provides. But you know what? It is true that numbers tell an important story. So here are some numbers that actually matter for the American people. 9 million. That's how many people have already obtained health insurance under the Affordable Care Act. 9 million. It's also 9 million people who don't have to worry that a major medical incident could bankrupt them and their families. 25 million. That's how many seniors on Medicare received free preventive care last year because of the Affordable Care Act. 25 million. That's 25 million seniors who can get a mammogram or a cholesterol screening without financial barriers so that serious diseases can be caught and treated earlier, saving taxpayers dollars. 8 million. Big number, 8 million. That's how many jobs have been created in this country since the passage of the Affordable Care Act. 8 million. That's more than twice as many jobs created than were lost during the 10 years before the Affordable Care Act was enacted. These are just some of the numbers that tell the true story of the Affordable Care Act. Not to mention the number of people with pre-existing conditions who can no longer be discriminated against, or the seniors who are seeing reduced prices on their prescription drugs, or the small business owners who now have a way to provide insurance for themselves and their employees. These are the numbers. These are the numbers that matter to me, because the Affordable Care Act is about helping the American people afford care in this country. So my colleagues on the other side of the aisle can go ahead and play their number games as long as they want. But their fixation doesn't add up. These numbers do. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, reserves. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, is recognized. With 2.5 minutes remaining.
How much time is left on either side?
Mr. Levin has 2.5 minutes remaining. Mr. Camp has 3.5 minutes remaining.
Is the chairman going to close?
I have no further speakers. I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman's recognized for 2.5 minutes.
I yield the balance of our time to the gentleman from Washington, Mr. McDermott.
Gentleman from Washington is recognized for 2.5 minutes. Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, what we're engaged in today is what I call loving a bill to death. Every legislator knows how you do it. You load it up with a bunch of stuff to kill it. They are still trying to do this. They are not talking about transparency or accountability. It is simply another plan to muck up the path to better health for Americans. It's not surprising because the House Republicans don't want a health care system that works any more than they want a balanced budget. If they wanted a balanced budget, they wouldn't push for health care policies that cost more to get less. America spends more on health care than any other advanced nation, and we get worse outcomes. Let me tell you one of the reasons for that. We spend less on social services. Instead of helping people afford good food to stay in shape, we cut food stamps. Instead of supporting families who care for their parents in the comfort of their home, we force them to push them into nursing homes. Instead of helping people to stay in their homes, instead of strengthening the bridge between job and new career, we pull the rug out from under them. And right now, every 8 seconds, another American loses his unemployment insurance. While I'm speaking, 15 families will lose their way of supporting themselves. Where do these people go? How do they stay healthy? Is it any wonder our diet is full of what we call comfort food? Is it any wonder that we're the most anxious country in the world? Is it any wonder that the ER has become more common than the doctor's office? We can pay now. We can invest in a country where people have jobs. We can help people keep their homes and care for themselves, or we will pay later. In skyrocketing healthcare costs and the economic drag of a sick nation, if Republicans wanted a health care system that works, we'd be investing, not wasting our time, in forcing states and the federal government to spend more on useless bureaucracy. Nobody's asking for this. Maybe the insurance companies want to have more data. I don't know. But nobody who's administering this program has said, let's have more reports. We don't know enough. It's like babies. You don't weigh them every day to see if they've gained weight. You take them in every couple months or every month and get the baby checked. That's what we're doing here already. And they say, no, let's do it every day. Let's do it every week. Let's waste more time and money. Vote no on this wasteful, destructive bill.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp's recognized for 3.5 minutes to close.
Thank you. I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman's recognized.
The reason this legislation is important is that from what little information we do have is we know the administration's not meeting their stated goals. They're not on track to meet 7 million people by March 31st. We don't know how many people, we don't know the mix of people that have enrolled. We don't know how many of them are young and healthy. We don't know how many of them have paid a premium. And the reason these things are important for us to know and to track is this is a big deal. This is 1/6 of the American economy. There's probably no legislative area that affects people more than their health care. And the reason we have to know this information is because if they aren't meeting their stated goals and their projections in terms of the cost of this bill, it could mean that people's premiums skyrocket next year. It could mean that the physician that they're used to seeing and being treated by, many times for an ongoing illness, may not be available to them under their insurance plan. So these are important issues. These are important benchmarks for us to know. It's important for the American people to know. It's important for the media to know. Because then, if we can understand what's really happening, as we are in the middle of this, constructive changes could be made to this bill. And what they want to do is keep us in the dark. They say vote no, make sure we don't know what's going on, and then we'll have a health care crisis even greater than the one we have now. So I urge a yes vote on this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Michigan yields back the balance of his time. All time for debate having expired, pursuant to House Resolution 455, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to amend the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act to require transparency in the operation of American health benefit exchanges.
For what purposes does the gentlelady from Massachusetts seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
Is the gentlelady opposed to the bill?
I am.
The gentlelady qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Ms. Clark of Massachusetts moves to recommit the bill H.R. 3362 to the Committee on Energy and Commerce.
The clerk will suspend. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I reserve point of order against the motion to recommit.
Point of order is reserved. The clerk may continue.
with instructions to report the same back to the House forthwith with the following amendment. Add at the end of the bill the following new section. Section 5, disclosure of lower costs and additional health benefits provided to individuals and families, not later than 5 days after the date of the enactment of this Act, and every month thereafter through March 2015, the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall submit to Congress and make available to state governors, state insurance commissioners, and the public a report containing information with respect to individuals and families enrolling in health insurance coverage through an exchange established under Title I of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act on each of the following. 1. The number of such individuals and families who have received premium tax credits or have lower out-of-pocket costs. 2. The number of such individuals and families who are no longer subject to discrimination based on pre-existing conditions. 3. The number of such individuals and families who are no longer subject to annual and lifetime limits on health insurance coverage. 4. The number of such individuals and families who were uninsured prior to enrolling in health insurance coverage through such an exchange. Nothing in this Act shall limit the ability of the Secretary of Health and Human Services to inform individuals and families of the lower costs for health insurance coverage and additional benefits that are available pursuant to the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act and Title I and Subtitle B of Title II of the Healthcare and Education Reconciliation Act of 2010.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlelady from Massachusetts is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume. This is the final amendment to the bill. This amendment will not kill the bill, and should it pass, the House will immediately take up the bill as amended. Mr. Speaker, having just been sworn in a month ago, may I first say it is an honor to serve the 5th District of Massachusetts. And my district is looking to us to focus on jobs, rebuilding the economy, and extending unemployment benefits. Instead, Republicans have scheduled the 48th vote to undermine the Affordable Care Act. We have a job to do. We have to ensure that the hardworking families we serve are able to navigate the health care law and are able to make informed decisions about their health care coverage. Our job is to ensure as problems arise, we are able to direct resources toward a timely fix. Some of my colleagues believe that an increase in transparency will help us achieve those goals. So why not do that? Why not let Americans know exactly what has been going on since this law has been implemented? Why not let people understand all facets of this law? I support transparency and making the law the best it can be for millions of families and children who will benefit from it. I know firsthand how good this reform will be for American people because I've watched it happen in my own state. In 2006, Massachusetts implemented health care reform, which today is benefiting hundreds of thousands of families. It took hard work, and it meant lawmakers who didn't always agree on everything had to work together to do right by those we serve. Today, 98% of the people in Massachusetts are benefiting from some form of health care coverage. Because I was not elected last fall, like millions of Americans, I watched from home as the destructive and irresponsible fight against the ACA shut our government down. It's time to stop the obstruction over this issue and get back to work for the American people. If our goal is truly transparency, not just harassment to make sure the law never works, why not give the full picture? Let's give families and businesses all the information they need regarding what's available to them, as well as what we are going to do to make the law work better. My motion to recommit will better inform those we serve with the facts about the benefits which millions of American families are seeking. My amendment will provide the full picture, not just data handpicked to support a partisan argument. This includes information regarding how many families and individuals have received tax credits, It will include disclosures on the number of Americans no longer subject to the discrimination based on pre-existing conditions. Families at home will know how many people are no longer subject to annual and lifetime limits on coverage. They will know how many people who were previously uninsured are now able to access health care and plan for their future. If we are to do right by those we serve, do what we were elected to do, which is make health care reform work for the American people, then we should spare the partisan agendas and pass this common sense amendment. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentlelady from Massachusetts yields back to the balance of her time. What purpose does the gentleman
Mr.
from
Speaker, I
Pennsylvania?
withdraw my point of order, and I claim the time in opposition to the motion.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Opponents of the Exchange Information and Disclosure Act argue that HHS is already reporting data. Yet more than 3 months after the disastrous launch of the exchanges, we simply do not know how many Americans have actually completed enrollment by paying their first month's premium. As Secretary Sebelius acknowledged at an Energy and Commerce Committee hearing in December, enrollment in an exchange is not complete until the first month's premium has been paid. The administration so far has refused to tell the American people how many people are actually enrolled in the health care law's exchanges. Either the administration is refusing to tell us how many people are actually enrolled, or they simply do not know. Neither answer should instill confidence in a law that puts over $2 trillion taxpayer dollars on the line. This underlying bill would require the administration to give us real and actual enrollment data. The American people deserve transparency, and this is what the Exchange Information Disclosure Act would deliver. I urge all members to oppose this motion to recommit and to vote for the underlying bill. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania yields back the balance of his time. Without objection, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion chair, the noes have it. The motion is not agreed to. The gentlelady from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote on the question of passage. This is a 15-minute vote. Vote. The yeas are 186. The nays are 226. The motion is not adopted. The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. In the opinion chair, the ayes have it. From New Jersey.
On that, I demand the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 259, the nays are 154. The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.